Welcome into the WalterPicks Fantasy Football Show. My name is Avery. I'm here joined with Seth, and we are going to talk about everything start sits for week 2 coming in with the Commanders on Thursday night against the Green Bay Packers. The number one guy we need to talk about that is on everybody's roster, possibly their starting lineup, is Bill Croskey-Merritt.
Let's go, Bill.
14.2 points last week against the Giants defense. Didn't look amazing, the Giants defense did, but Bill did. 10 carries for 82 yards and a touchdown. That was good for, again, over 14 fantasy points. The Green Bay Packers defensive line is very, very different, though. They have Micah Parsons, who didn't even play a full snap share last week, and his presence was definitely felt. Are we starting him coming into this matchup? I'm leaning no on this one. Bill Croskey-Merritt, he is my guy, projected for 11.5 rushing attempts, but he cannot be as ultra efficient as he was last week. 8.2 yards per carry. He had a 40-yard run in the fourth quarter that made his fantasy week that much better. Seth, are we starting him? Who else are we going into with this matchup?
Yeah, I'm not really leaning towards starting him exactly like you said. One of the key things I look for in a start sit is volume and efficiency. And when someone is way over efficient, like they score one touchdown on one target, or they have 8.2 yards per carry, which is not sustainable for a player like Bill Croskey-Merritt, maybe Etienne, someone that's mega fast, super shifty. But if he had a more normal game, 4.5 yards per carry and didn't score a touchdown, he's going to score you 5 fantasy points. So I'm leaning away from starting him. But if you start him week 1, you probably need to start him for week 2. So he's definitely someone that can be a good option. But like you said, Cowboys defense or Packers defense with Micah Parsons is very strong, and it's not someone that you really want to be facing. They shut down David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I believe both those under 3 yards per carry. So absolutely a tough start for week 2. But in this game as well, you may have a tight end like Tucker Kraft, Zach Ertz. Both those guys scored a touchdown on, I believe, 2 targets or less. That's what I was talking about as well with the efficiency. Both those guys, not really looking for them for week 2. I'd rather start some of the guys off the waiver wire, like maybe Johnston, who had 11 targets. That's what I'm looking for a little bit more with a start.
Yeah, and there were so many wide receivers for the Packers that got targets. It's going to be a little bit tough to trust your Matthew Goldens, your Jaden Reeds, who's dealing with a foot injury. And Bill Croskey-Merritt is also slightly in a committee right now with the rest of these running backs. And then we drop it down to the Jacksonville Jaguars against the Cincinnati Bengals this week. A very positive matchup for quite literally everybody on both sides of the ball. Travis Etienne had an amazing game last week. Really just looked like the workhorse RB1 that we was hoping he would be years ago. He put up 18.6 fantasy football points on 16 carries, 142 yards, even got some receptions out of the backfield. He looked good in every single aspect. And now we have Tank Bigsby getting traded to the Eagles. So that just solidifies his RB1 role. Now I think Bashaw Tutin can definitely be a guy we stash. I'm a little bit hesitant that it'll be a 1 RB system the entire way through. But until he shows us otherwise, I believe we're going to be starting him against a pretty good fantasy defense and allowing points to the running backs. He had 61% of the snaps last week. We can expect it to be around that level, maybe a bit higher. But again, if you're getting 16 carries on 60% of the snaps, I'm starting him in a positive matchup.
Yeah, the one thing I'm worried about is, and I'm starting him, but one thing I am worried about is the efficiency metrics. We look back at last season, his rush yards per game, 37 yards per game. His snap share, it wasn't as good, but let's see if we can get his yards per carry here. Rush attempts, targets, where's his yards per carry? 3.8. I mean, he was mega efficient week 1. He was not really that good last year. Let's just be honest. I mean, he's got games with 2, 3, 2, 3, 2 yards per carry, and these are games where he had some attempts. He had some opportunities, not too many, but he had some opportunities. And so I worry if he's going to be able to hold on to the backfield as much. I think Tutin's a good ad. But definitely starting him for week 2. Just wanted to throw that out there. Plus, I did want to mention their schedule. It gets very, very difficult. We look here at their game log for this season. After this week, Houston, very tough defense. San Francisco, KC, very tough defense. Seattle, the Rams, great defense. The Raiders, they're solid. Then they play Houston. They get Arizona. Tennessee looked amazing. The Jets, Denver in the playoffs. This is a very tough schedule for the entire team. I do think the offense is going to struggle a little bit. So I still think, even after Tank Bigsby, that this may be a good sell high. But in terms of week 2, he's a great start against the Bengals. Avery, is there anyone else in this game that you think is worth talking about? Start sits, obviously Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. We're getting those guys back in the lineup. Is there anyone else who stands out to you?
Yeah, I do think that Brenton Strange is a deeper target at tight end. We had a whole bunch of injuries with Brock Bowers possibly missing a week, George Kittle out with a hamstring injury, even Evan Ingram is questionable now. If you need to go pick up a guy, Brenton Strange, almost 10 fantasy football points. He averaged about that without Evan Ingram last year. He can be a streamer option that I believe will be pretty valuable for the year. And obviously, with the Bengals, we're not overreacting too much. It is week one. They historically have a bad week one. You're starting all of those guys regardless. And then dropping it down to the Cowboys and Giants coming into week two, we have to talk about Javonte Williams, a guy that put everybody on notice. I guarantee he wasn't in that many starting lineups. He was getting drafted outside the top 30 backs, but finishes with 20 fantasy points last week
RB5.
against
Incredible.
the Eagles. That is absolutely insane. Most of it did come from the 2 touchdowns that he scored at the goal line, 3.6 yards per carry, but 15 rushing attempts is definitely not something we can just write off. Seth, how are you feeling? Is this guy somebody we can trust week by week, especially coming into the Giants matchup?
Yeah, I think definitely this week for sure. I honestly have him as a buy high. I think some people are saying some people in fantasy football always try to sell high every time there's a big game. Sometimes you got to hold those players. Sometimes you just got to start them and say, hey, I drafted really well. And I think Javonte Williams was a great draft pick this year. The Cowboys have historically had some great goal line running backs. I mean, Zeke Elliott was scoring a touchdown per game. I'm not saying these are the exact same level of backs, but when it comes to the goal line work, they rushed first. And that's what got me excited about Javonte. We know the Cowboys in the past, especially last year, they were almost passing first in the red zone. Not that they got there a ton, but this year it looks like they're rushing first, and it was really effective. The O-line looked like they had a good push. So I think Javonte Williams is a great start against the Giants. And if he's someone you want to trade for before he has another good week, because that's going to just make his price go up, and he probably will have a good week against the Giants, now may be the time. And then the other player in this game I want to talk about was George Pickens. So I'm going to bring him up. I think that this is a scary start for me. Now, this is a little bit of it's a tough one for me because I've been promoting Pickens all off season long. I mean, I watched him with the Steelers. The potential is huge. He's got CeeDee Lamb distracting the defenses. Everything should go well, but he just had a 12% target share. He wasn't super involved. Every time Dak dropped back, he was targeting CeeDee Lamb. He at least looked his direction first. So for me, I think George Pickens is someone I'd like to sit this week. We had a lot of later wide receivers stand out. We're going to talk about some of them a little bit later. But George Pickens for me is a sit until he shows it. Wait till he has his first good week. Start some of the other guys who have been more involved in their offenses. But Avery, if you drafted George Pickens, is he hitting your lineup this week?
Yeah, it definitely is a tougher situation. I think Javonte is a bit more on the edge of like a safe, consistent start and sit this week. But again, until he proves otherwise, he did have over 70% of the snaps, so he is that guy. But George Pickens didn't have a great game. Dak Prescott also, fantasy point wise, didn't. I think he played a lot better than the numbers say. There were a
Agreed.
lot of drops in that game. But the main issue with George Pickens it is just a George Pickens issue, man. Like there were routes where he was just giving up. When he was not getting the ball, he did not care about the offense. I feel like that's definitely not going to help him season long for getting targets and just being a
Yeah,
positive force on the offense. With that being said, it really cannot get worse than last week. He got 4 targets, didn't really turn it into much. Again, only 6 fantasy points. I think he can improve. It is a decent matchup this week against the Giants. The
it is.
question
Yep.
is, are they going to blow him out early and then just, give it to Javonte Williams? He's a risky start. I like for him to prove us otherwise until I can put him into the lineup. But again, he doesn't need a huge target share to be fantasy viable. He can get 4 receptions. One of them is a touchdown and a 40-yard reception. So it is definitely on the boom bust side. And then you look at the Giants here on this one, not really starting anybody outside Malik Neighbors. Possibly Tyrone Tracy, but again, he did split with Cam Scatterboo, so I'm kind of avoiding that backfield altogether right now.
Yeah, and I agree. He had a bad week one, and it's going to be the same situation. They're going to be losing this game most of the game. If Tyrone Tracy can't have a good week one, I don't see how he's going to have a good week two against the Cowboys.
And then when we look at the Detroit Lions and specifically David Montgomery here coming in against the Chicago Bears, he did not look great. Now he did outtouch Jahmyr Gibbs from a rushing attempt perspective. He did have 11, but only 37% of the snaps. Jahmyr Gibbs did absolutely destroy him in that. They did both get receptions, which is always going to happen. Gibbs will lead in that, but 8.3 fantasy points for David Montgomery. No touchdown in this one. The streak is probably not going to be alive this year at all. And they do get a pretty decent matchup against the Bears. I don't think David Montgomery is a guy that we can trust in our starting lineup. The Detroit Lions definitely did look a bit more shaky than we expected without Ben Johnson.
Yeah, and I mean the Bears, I don't know. I mean, the scoreboard says they're a decent matchup, But the game says they are a monster on defense. This Bears defense was underrated last year. In this year, I'm not going to even blame them that much. They really got let down by the offense in the second half. That should have been an easy win. The defense scored a touchdown for the Bears, and they were dominant up front. I mean, Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason were struggling the entire game until it really got out of hand in the second half. So yeah, I'm scared for David Montgomery and honestly Jahmyr Gibbs. He had so many. What do you have? 10 receptions in this game, or at least 10 targets. It was an absolutely insane game for Jahmyr Gibbs, who didn't score a crazy amount of fantasy points with 10 receptions. That is wild. This Detroit offense does look like they're in trouble a little bit without Frank Ragnow up front blocking for them, and without Ben Johnson running this offense. They just seem a little bit lost. And David Montgomery, he's been really a bastion of consistency. I go to his game log, and the Green Bay is a tough matchup. We can start there, but look at last year. I mean, if he's in the game, he pretty much never was as bad as he was week 1, 16, 17, 21, 15, 21, 14, 12, 12. 12 is red for him. And he was even worse than that this week, even with, what was he? We had I added it here in the WalterPicks app. You can add so many stats here. He had 4 receptions and still only had 8 fantasy points. So this is definitely someone that I'm looking to sit this week as well.
Yeah, definitely. And when you look at the Chicago Bears side of this very quickly, it kind of looks like Rome Odunze is the wide receiver 1 right now, and DJ Moore is the more of a fill him in wherever he can kind of back. Ben Johnson's using him in the backfield a little bit, a couple rushing attempts last week. I do think he'll have better weeks than he just did, but with Caleb Williams putting up 24 fantasy points, a couple of touchdowns, it definitely raises the question of how boom bust are these receivers really going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm not super excited about starting any of them, to be honest. I think that you never know who it's going to be exactly. And Colston Loveland, really disappointing debut. He had 12 yards, I believe. So this Bears pass attack, it's just not looking good for week 2. I'm not going to start anybody until they really start to show. Maybe DJ Moore. I think I'd still start DJ Moore. He's still a good option. But I'm not really going to start anybody else until they put up some good points on it. Maybe consistent basis, or at least show the target share to do so.
Yeah, I definitely don't like how Zacchaeus saw 7 targets and 8 fantasy points. So, and then we go ahead and get our Tennessee Titans matchup versus the Los Angeles Rams, a defense who did look pretty good last week, one that we were expecting everybody to start. Their pressure rate on CJ Stroud was absolutely insane. 40% of his dropbacks were pressured. You can expect that similar story to be told for the Titans here, who did relatively struggle against a very good Broncos defense last week in Cam Ward's first game. The only good thing here is that he's finally going to get his wide receiver 1 back, his vet in Calvin Ridley. He was stuck in jail, stuck in the Patrick Surtain box last week. We knew it was going to happen. 6.7 fantasy points. The good news here is for him, he played over 90% of the snaps. He did see 8 targets. It only turned into 4 receptions, not a lot of fantasy points again because Pat Surtain is so good. The Rams don't have a shutdown corner like that. No team does. So I think it's a spot we can go through and start Calvin Ridley. We were expecting that. This isn't just random variance. He's coming into a better matchup here. I think Cam Ward going to have a little bit more time in the pocket this week, but still definitely a good pressure rate and defense from the Los Angeles Rams. Calvin Ridley is a guy that I'm starting.
Yeah, I agree, Avery. One of the things that I wanted to call out was he had a huge drop in this game. And that was one of the things that Cam Ward struggled with, is that his receivers couldn't catch the ball. So even when Calvin Ridley, if he would have caught that one pass, he had room to run as well. He probably would have had 10 fantasy points because he would have added a catch. He would have added 20 yards to his total. It wouldn't have even been that bad. But this week, he's finally out of jail, exactly like you said. I think a solid start. He's going to see a lot more. He's going to see more targets. He saw a 32% target share still. That tells you how much. We'll go to the game log here. That tells you how many. He had 4 receptions. Let's check his targets here. Snap percentage, super high. Love that. 8 targets. He still had 8 targets against Pat Surtain. That is great numbers. So he's definitely going in my lineup this week. I like Alec Aomenor as well off the waiver wire. Maybe not a guy you start, but he had 7 targets as well. So Cam Ward's definitely looking to spread the ball around. I think Alec's going to do a little bit better this week against a softer defense. I mean, the Rams are still great, but man, this Broncos defense, I think, is going to be a nightmare for fantasy football. They're just so good, even when the offense struggled a lot this game, because the Titans have a good defense too. So that's one thing to watch out for the Rams. But yeah, Calvin Ridley's going in the lineup. I think Tony Pollard can go in your lineups as well. Again, just facing just a little bit easier defense, I think is the right move.
Yeah, yeah. When you look at Devontae Adams, some of these receivers on the other side, Puka obviously had a great game. Devontae Adams a little bit disappointing with 9 fantasy points, but he was very high as far as routes run this game next to Puka Nacua. He's obviously going to be on the field for every single play. He had over 90% snap share. There's going to be better weeks ahead. Matthew Stafford only had 29 passing attempts. You can expect that to be higher in certain matchups. This one is probably going to be one of those where Devontae Adams can get his revenge game in sorts, but I'm starting him. We're starting all the top 3 guys.
Yeah, just one thing to call out with Puka as well. He's questionable, so we'll have to see how he looks this week. He'll probably play, but just something to watch because if he's out, Devonta Adams is obviously a must start. But 8 targets for Devonta Adams, I'm putting him in my lineup as well.
And then we go ahead and look at the New England Patriots versus the Miami Dolphins coming into this week. We saw something I was not expecting in the Raiders matchup. Drake May, almost 50 passing attempts.
Wow.
That is absolutely insane. And you look, all of the receivers ate because of it. Stephon Diggs, 11.7 fantasy points. Kayshon Boutte, 16.3 and 100 yards. Travion Henderson got some receiving. Hunter Henry got 10 fantasy points. Demario Douglas had 8. Everybody ate here. And obviously, Kayshon Boutte is going to be one of the top waiver wire ads because of it. He did have a pretty good end to last season as well. So I don't necessarily think this is a fluke game. Can he average 100 yards a game? Definitely not. But this is a guy that might be a spot start against a Miami defense who looked absolutely terrible. In my opinion, the only way to solve this team is to completely blow it up, but that's not fantasy football relevant. But either way, Kayshon Boutte is going to be a guy I'm hesitant to start. If you're in deeper leagues, you can go through and do it. I want to see it happen again. Stephon Diggs was restricted slightly in his snaps because he's coming back from that ACL injury. I believe only 77% of the snaps. That's going to go up. So his target share should be higher. But again, we saw Daniel Jones completely cut up this Miami defense. So anything is fair game here for these guys. Seth, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just looking through his stats here because one of the things that I call out, and we look at this every single week, and why I recommend using the WalterPicks app is target share. You look at all the other apps, what they're going to show you is they're going to show you his receptions, 6 receptions, and they're going to show you his targets, which is 8. That looks awesome off the waiver wire. And if that was on a 25% target share or 30% target share, I'd say, yeah, this guy's a great start. But when we go back to the summary tab, we see that that was on 17.8% target share. And Drake May is not going to throw the ball 50 times per week, especially maybe this week against the Dolphins, who got crushed by the Colts, crushed by Daniel Jones and the Colts. If the Patriots can get out to a lead and he's still only going to get 17% target share, he's not going to be very startable. So I do think he's a good waiver ad. But I think we need to see a more normal game from the Patriots where they're going to be around that 30 to 35 pass attempts, maybe even 40, but not towards 50, because that, like you said, Avery, made everybody do well. So I do like him. Solid waiver wire ad. Love the points. But the target share at wide receiver 47, that is just not going to cut it on a week-to-week basis. Now, he did have great air yards. I love that. And again, 6 receptions for over 100 yards. That's great. That's great yardage as well. So he may be another player that can do well with lower targets. But I always get hesitant when I start to see, when you're below 20% target share, that probably is a player that's going to be inconsistent at the very least for fantasy football.
Yeah, yeah. And when you look at the Miami side of things, I am completely worried. Devon Etienne is really the only guy that I'm somewhat confidently starting because he doesn't need Tua to be amazing to be fantasy viable. He can get checkdowns. He can get 5 receptions a game. It's okay. But Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both around 60% of the snaps last week. Tyreek was visibly upset on the sidelines, and it's rightfully so. I believe he hasn't had a catch over 30 yards in a year. Both of them put under 10 fantasy points up. Honestly, it's hard to say sit Tyreek Hill, especially, against the New England defense, which I believe Christian Gonzalez is going to be out again this week. But Seth, what are you doing with these wide receivers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wasn't big on drafting Tyreek Hill, but I do think that it was kind of promising. Honestly, he was really the guy that did at least a little bit decently week 1. So I probably will start him this week against the Patriots. They did struggle against Jacoby Myers and Geno Smith, and the competition wasn't the strongest week 1. The Patriots definitely have a little bit of growing to do, really a brand new roster, a lot of young talent. So I think Tyreek Hill is a fine start. I probably wouldn't go for Jalen Waddle this week if you have other options. But Tyreek Hill, I think it's an okay start. I mean, if you're stacked, if you're in a smaller league, maybe sit Tyreek Hill. But he's someone that I feel a little bit more comfortable starting. And we'll take a look here. We got him as wide receiver 32 in the app. I mean, that's right on the edge of start sit range. Target share only 20%. He didn't play the end of the game. He was on the bench. That's why he was that's one of the reasons why we got a lot of shots at Tyreek Hill. like frustrated and yelling at teammates because he was on the bench at the end of the game. There's no reason for him to play. If they can keep it close and he plays the entire game, he'll probably see a little bit better target share. Receiving air yards, 86 is solid. So 8 is a floor. That's the worst it's probably going to be. So I'm not too scared to start him, especially if you're in a league like 12-man or more, where you probably don't have a lot of better bench options.
So then we go ahead and look down at the New Orleans Saints versus the San Francisco 49ers. And there's actually a bit more about this game to talk about than a lot of people think because of some injuries and some situations going on here. Johnston, most importantly, 15.6 fantasy points. I did pick him up in the WalterPicks internal fantasy football league right before the game started. I did lose George Kittle, though, so good on me there. But Johnston looked absolutely amazing, partially because the average depth of target on this team is going to be so low outside of the couple 40-yard bombs you get to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Will they be accurate when you have Spencer Rattler at quarterback? That's another question. But Alvin Kamara, Johnston, they're going to eat in the intermediate game, and that's exactly what we saw. As long as we don't have Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau on the PUP list, I think Johnston is a guy that we can spot start, again, if you're dealing with a ton of tight end injuries. Seth, are you as happy about Johnston as I am?
I mean, I see 2 number 1s on this player profile here. Tight end 1 in terms of fantasy points. Tight end 1 in terms of targets. I know Brock Bowers missed a little time, but that's more than Brock Bowers got in his game. That's more than Trey McBride. Obviously, it's 1. It's better than everybody. And when we look at we'll just click into this on the WalterPicks app. One of the cool features that you can use here to look here. We got Harold Fannin Jr. also on the waiver wire and leading these guys out there in targets. We see Kyle Pitts up there as well. Wow. I mean, it's week 1, guys. So we do see a lot of names that may not stay up at 11, 9, 8 targets a game. But when you're tight end 1 in terms of targets, that is maybe the must add of the week. And Avery, I am going to start him again. I mean, how can you deny 1 in targets, 1 in fantasy points? He had 9 catches. I'm definitely starting this guy. And he could be the top waiver add of the week. One note I will add for fantasy football here is that if you don't need a tight end, but you have someone to drop and you don't need anything else, you don't want to let your league mates get this guy. Somebody in your league needs a tight end badly. And if you're like, man, I picked up somebody late, they're clearly not going to work out. Maybe it was Tank Bigsby. You've got Tank Bigsby. You got to drop him and add Johnston. Do not let your league mates get this guy because they maybe punted on tight end. Maybe they got Evan Ingram. Maybe they got one of these other guys that's just not producing. Don't let them get the tight end 1 off the waiver wire. So I just want to say, strategy wise, I would try to throw some blockers out there. And then, obviously Kamara, amazing start. He was great. He's normally great at the start of the season as well. So I'm going with both those guys for week 2.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Johnston also did drop a beautiful pass from Spencer Rattler that would have given him a touchdown and 7 more fantasy points. So just know if that would have happened, people would have been spending all of their fab on this guy. And the San Francisco 49ers are definitely a little bit worrisome. We'll touch on them very shortly. Brock Purdy is dealing with shoulder and toe injury, questionable coming into this week's matchup against the Saints. We have George Kittle obviously out with a hamstring injury. Juwan Jennings is also, he just underwent an MRI for his shoulder. He's maybe going to play. We'll find out. But that leaves Ricky Pearsall. Even the backup receivers here. Demarcus Robinson is suspended. Jacob Cowing is on the IR. Pearsall is really the only option, and I believe Mac Jones is going to be the starting quarterback if Purdy misses.
Yeah, we're just a concussion away from head, shoulders, knees, and toes here because the 49ers are injured across the board. And, man, I'm not worried, though. They're playing the Saints. So if you've got starters in this game, even if it's Mac Jones, I'm not going to start Mac Jones. Now, I'm going to start him in the WalterPicks 32-man league because Brock Purdy's my starter and I've got the backup. But in most leagues, you're not starting Mac Jones, but you can start Christian McCaffrey. You can start Ricky Pearsall. I mean, they're going to run plays. They're going to throw the balls. And we see guys from the Saints last week. I mean, maybe you'd say comparable quarterback or Mac Jones, maybe even better than both of them probably. And he's on a team with a great offense, great players. So any 49er starters that are in the game, who else are going to throw it to? So love Ricky Pearsall again this week. Love, Christian McCaffrey. You could even start the backup tight end as well. He scored a touchdown last week too. So I think all good options. If they're playing for San Francisco, they're probably in my lineup. All right, we're jumping down to Keon Coleman and Avery. I got to ask you this question because Sauce Gardner last week, he started the shadow program against DK Metcalf. He shadowed him almost the entire game. He allowed only 1 catch. So he did a great job against Pittsburgh's clearly best receiver. I got to ask you, facing this Bills team, and then I'll let you run through all of the starts for these guys, but I had to start. Is Keon Coleman going to get the shadow? Do you see any Bills wide receiver that stands out enough in order to get the shadow from Sauce Gardner.
Yeah, I think if anybody is going to get shadowed, it will be Keon Coleman. You have Khalil Shakir kind of operating in the slot, and then Josh Palmer is definitely not going to be, a number one guy to focus on defense, especially when you look at what Keon Coleman did last week. 11 targets, 8 receptions, over 100 yards, and he did score a
Wow.
touchdown. Like, this might have been his best game ever as a Bill
I think it was.
in his second year. It had to have been, because this game was amazing. Over 25 fantasy points. Definitely going to be walking that back a little bit. But even if he does get shadowed, I mean, we saw the Steelers offense put up over 30 points on the Jets. So it's not impossible to generate offense, but it could very well be a game where Josh Allen just takes it into his own hands again and just does everything he does with it. So I would still start Keon Coleman. He does have a bit more like boom bust potential than some of these other guys. Khalil Shakir is going to get obviously the safer target share, but is he going to break out? The answer is likely no.
Yeah, and one thing I want to highlight in the WalterPicks app, again, these stats, they are game-changing for your decision-making. And I'm going to click into the snaps here. 75 snaps for Keon Coleman. That is just a crazy amount of snaps. The amount of pass plays the Bills ran. I'm going to type in Josh Allen real quick because we got to check this out. He was awesome in this game. Obviously, him and Lamar Jackson were amazing. QB 46 passing attempts. That is not normal. Last year, again, makes it so easy in the WalterPicks app. You can see 30 pass attempts per game, QB 23. He threw 16, so like 50% more passes than he normally does. And that's what worries me about Keon Coleman. Because when we go back here, you'll see he had good target share. But if they throw around the 30 passes per game, 25% of 30 is about 7 to 8 targets. It's all right, but it's not nearly what he got this game. I mean, we see what he got this game. He had 8 receptions, and how many targets did he have? Did I miss that? 11 targets. He's probably going to see 3 or 4 less targets in this game. So that's the scary part about Keon Coleman. And the touchdowns, the Bills this was the best. It will not get any better than 46 pass attempts. Like, have to throw it down the field against the Ravens. So that's my concern with Keon Coleman. I think he's a good sell high. The one bright spot that's like causing doubt in my mind, though, is the 2-point conversion at the end of the game. They just threw it up to him. And that is an amazing sign. I love to see that for fantasy football. When a player gets the target and they trust them in the one-on-one. They didn't go to Khalil Shakir. They didn't go to Dalton Kincaid. They didn't even call Josh Allen's number, even though he obviously maybe runs it there if nobody's on him. But they threw it to Coleman pretty much right away. And that, to me, says maybe he's worth holding on to. But they're never going to throw 46 passes a game. Most games, most weeks, probably even this week against the Jets, they're going to get up by 2 touchdowns, and they're going to run the ball with all of their running backs and Josh Allen, and they're going to squeeze them out of the game. So that's the worry with the Bills wide receivers. So, Avery, are you going to start him this week?
I will start him. He's going to be like my last flex option. Again,
Okay.
like you said, the pass volume does have to come down. And you look at the Jets matchup, there is a very, very high chance that they just run away with this game. They're favored by 6.5 points. I believe that's going to go up by the time we get to the game. Seth, are you trusting Justin Fields after the legacy fantasy football game of almost 30 fantasy points against a pretty good Steelers defense?
Yeah, they are pretty good. I do think that some of the my analysis of that as a Steelers fan, knowing Justin Fields played for the Steelers last year, was the Jets offense really kind of completely flipped. Because last year they had Aaron Rodgers, last couple of years. So they were really kind of like swapped. The Steelers were pass heavy. The Jets were run heavy. But he looked great with Garrett Wilson, his college teammate. I absolutely love that. I have Garrett Wilson in the WalterPicks league and really pumped about having Garrett Wilson on my team this year because that connection looks great. So I think that it's okay. I think that I'll start him. I'm honestly considering starting him over Dak Prescott. I know that Dak played well in that first game, but Justin Fields with the rushing upside, that's hard to match. It's hard to match when you just don't have it, So I think Justin Fields is probably going to end up in my starting lineup this week against the Bills. I'll take the rushing upside. In the Bills defense, honestly, it's good. I know the Ravens are elite and amazing, but the Jets are going to try to do a similar strategy to what the Ravens did with a rushing quarterback, and Breece Hall looked amazing in this first game as well. So I'll probably will start Justin Fields this week as a top 12 guy.
And then when we go down to the Pittsburgh Steelers, just speaking of that, Aaron Rodgers gets a matchup against the Seattle Seahawks here. He put up 25 fantasy points. I mean, they did score a ton, so it had to come from somewhere. I am not necessarily a believer in being able to start Aaron Rodgers on a week-to-week basis. I mean, the amount of volume, the amount of offense that was generated is not normal. Calvin Austin, I would consider picking up off the waiver wire, 17 fantasy points. Jalen Warren also split with Kenneth Gainwell,
Yeah.
out of all people. And Caleb Johnston put up -2 fantasy points. It was just, he's not going to be a guy that we can start for a very long time. I would still just hold him on the back of your bench. But Seth, as a Steelers fan, what is your analysis of what just happened?
Yeah, it was a mind-blowing, to be honest, because I love watching this game, man. It brings me back. Honestly, it's like bringing it back to childhood. And I know a lot of Steelers fans probably feel similar because at least people, Steelers fans my age, because we haven't seen a quarterback that can pass like this since Ben Roethlisberger was healthy. And he wasn't even that healthy at the back end of his career. So maybe been like 7 or 8 years since we've seen a quarterback with this kind of zip on the ball, with this kind of accuracy. And the thing that I want to call out is 30 pass plays, 20 run plays. That's not the Steelers offense that we've known and hated over the last years. And they pass so much in the red zone. They passed. They got Jonnu Smith off one of those little shovel passes as well. That gives them both a reception, gets Aaron Rodgers a touchdown. I think he's dangerous. So this is another player, like I talked with Juwan Johnson. I don't want to let my league mates who have a bad quarterback get this guy. Maybe Bo Nix looks like he struggled a little bit. Maybe Dak Prescott, they run in a lot of touchdowns this year. Maybe that's just the play to the Cowboys. I don't want to let my league mates get Aaron Rodgers. He was quarterback 7, and the Jets are good. The Jets have a great defense. They sacked him a couple of times. They put him under pressure, and the Steelers' offense actually was good. So Arthur Smith, I don't know. I mean, maybe he can run an offense when you have Aaron Rodgers running the offense. I mean, we saw that with Mike McCarthy as well for Green Bay, that the offensive coordinator suddenly looks real good when you have Aaron Rodgers running all the plays. So he's a player that I don't know if I'm going to start him, but I don't want to let my league mates get him off the waiver wire. So I'm willing to bid a little bit. Again, if you've got a player you can drop, I'll probably try to add him and hold him and make sure my league mates who don't have a good quarterback don't get him.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little bit worried about starting guys like DK Metcalf, Jonnu Smith in this matchup against the Steelers or against the Seahawks, because we don't know what to expect. Are we going to see 30 points every week? Probably not. DK is probably going to be a start for you. We'll see what he can do. Yeah, he was covered by Sauce Gardner for a majority of that game and struggled because of it. So it's not necessarily entirely inclusive of what he can do. But Seth, if you go ahead and look up Zach Charbonnet, we go over here to the Seattle Seahawks side of things.
Put my spelling to the test here.
Yeah.
There we go.
It is definitely a tough one. He had more usage than Kenneth Walker on the ground. And I don't want people to completely overreact on this. Kenneth Walker did have 10 carries. Zach Charbonnet had 12. But Kenneth Walker was missing in and out a lot of camp because of his foot injury. I think the snap split here is definitely due to that injury, and they're still working him back in. Zach Charbonnet saw 58% of the snaps. Ken Walker saw 40. It's going to be a tough start against this Pittsburgh defense, especially if both of these guys are still splitting. It's not like Sam Darnold looked amazing. Cooper Kupp did not look great. That is also understandable. I don't think we're going to be starting him in this matchup either, but JSN did look good. We obviously are starting him as a top wide receiver option.
Yeah, and I brought this up in the WalterPicks app here. It's the start sit tool, and you can compare any two players. This is just, again, makes it so easy to look at both the players, like you said, Avery. And yeah, I mean, this is the key. The snap share, 57% for Zach Charbonnet, 40% for Ken Walker. Scary. And in this touchdown, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Avery, but this was an early in the game touchdown, wasn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think this was early in the game, and that is an even worse sign. So it's like he's getting the touchdowns pretty early on, and he was just better. And you take away the touchdown, Kenneth Walker was better. So, I mean, we can kind of like, obviously you take away their best play, they do worse. I get that. But without the touchdown, in most weeks, the reason I say that, most weeks, most players will not be scoring a touchdown. So the points per game definitely going down a little bit there if Charbonnet doesn't score. But I don't know if you can start either of these guys. Personally, I don't think I want to start either one against the Steelers. Avery, I know we drafted Ken Walker so high. I didn't. I didn't, to be honest, just because there are some other guys I liked in that area. But let's say you drafted them, maybe you got stuck, you needed a running back. You probably need another running back at this point, don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely is worrisome. And we go ahead and look at the Cleveland Browns versus the Baltimore Ravens this week. It's a tough matchup. But the Cleveland Browns, Dylan Sampson put up 17.3 fantasy football points. Now, we do have to be a little bit reserved about this. First of all, I don't understand why ESPN had Jerome Ford projected for 14 fantasy points on the week. I did not understand that. He did not put up a lot. I don't think Dylan Sampson is going to be like a start. Going into the Denver Broncos matchup this week against the Colts, who again had an amazing week, RJ Harvey definitely disappointed some people. We do have to understand this was always going to be a split backfield, especially in week 1. As we get to the later ends of the year after their bye week in week 12, we can expect RJ Harvey to be fantasy viable on a week-to-week basis, but he played 29% of the snaps compared to J.K. Dobbins, who pretty much dominated in everything else at 52%. He had a ton of rushing work. The Denver Broncos are projected to win this game only by 2.5 points over the Indianapolis Colts. So there is an opportunity for these running backs to get more usage, even if it isn't a blowout. But RJ Harvey's a guy that I'm not confidently starting until we see at least the snap share go up. Seth, what's your opinion on that?
I think 100% agree from a start sit perspective. RJ Harvey's a guy I may try to trade for. He's a rookie. It's his first game. So, of course, it's a tight game as well against Tennessee, who's a great defense. They're really, really good against the run. So, yeah, I'm trying to trade for him, but I'm not really going to start him until we see that snap share go up.
Yeah, and you look at Michael Pittman. He gets put in the Patrick Surtain box if he does get shadowed. It's a little bit worrisome. It could be Josh Downs at times, but again, I'm not loving starting Daniel Jones in this matchup. Part of me believes that it was just kind of a fluke game. He did have some tush-push touchdowns. We'll see what happens in this week's matchup.
Yeah, I'm going to say Pittman. Anybody that faces Pat Surtain, right to the bench. No questions asked. Last year did not matter. Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf. He plays great receivers, and he shuts them down. That's why he's the best cornerback in the NFL.
And then looking at the Cardinals side of things against the Carolina Panthers this week, it is relatively a good matchup for their defense. But we want to look specifically at the split between James Conner and Trey Benson. It was a bit closer than people expected. James Conner did get all the usage at the goal line, but Trey Benson definitely had more usage than we expected. 8 carries. What kind of split can we see in the future? We know James Conner definitely has a little bit of injury history, but in this matchup, we're starting James Conner. It's a beautiful one. The Panthers allow a lot of fantasy points to the running backs. We'll see how much usage Trey Benson gets behind him, though.
Yeah, I think I don't know if he's a good start. I mean, he's maybe someone I like in DFS this week. He's going to be so cheap. And Travis Etienne crushed the Panthers last week. So I'd say Travis Etienne and Trey Benson have some similarities. Definitely the more explosive back for this team. But we'll see. They talked about it all year long. But James Conner still had 14.4 fantasy points. That's good enough for me. So he's staying in my lineup. But Trey Benson, maybe he finds the lineup sometime too.
And when we look at the Chiefs matchup here against the Philadelphia Eagles, it's going to be a good one that we've seen plenty of times before. Marquise Brown, though, Hollywood put up 20 fantasy points last week against a pretty decent Chargers defense. Now, there was no Xavier Worthy. He is taking it day to day with a shoulder. I don't think he's going to play in this week's matchup, which makes Hollywood Brown that much more of a start. He had 16 targets. I mean, the target share was absolutely amazing. He ran the most routes on the team. If Xavier Worthy's out, Hollywood Brown is a guy that I'm starting pretty easily here.
Yeah, I agree. The only concern here, Avery, and I want to know for those of you who play in fab leagues or those who need to use your waiver priority wisely, Hollywood Brown for me probably not a high priority, just because when Xavier Worthy comes back, he's going to lose a little bit of that. Then when Rashee Rice comes back week 6, he's going to lose a little bit more, and he may not be startable. So there's a chance he keeps a little bit of this kind of like rushing like role for this team, but he does worry me from a waiver wire perspective. He's definitely going to help you this week, definitely going to start this week. But Avery, do you have any advice for those people that need somebody on the waiver wire?
Yeah, he definitely is one of those short-term surge kind of players, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you know players like him, probably players like Juwan Johnson as well for when Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau come back. Like, these guys can get you fantasy points even if they're not complete season-long league winners at that point. But you look at Isaiah Pacheco on the other side, definitely a tough matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Carter will be in, hopefully at least, for this game for the entirety of it. Isaiah Pacheco is not a guy I'm loving to start. Seth, how do you feel about this backfield?
He was on my must avoid list, and it's not a victory lap after week 1. I hope he does well. I got him on my dynasty team and I can't sell him at this point. So I'm hoping we get a little bit of a bounce back, but he just didn't look that good. He didn't look like the best back on the team. He evenly split with Kareem Hunt in terms of touches and targets. So I'm definitely sitting Kareem Hunt this week. I'm definitely sitting Isaiah Pacheco this week.
Yeah, and you go ahead and look up AJ Brown for the Eagles side of things very
Oh
quickly.
no. Oh
Obviously,
no.
this team did not do great receiving outside of maybe Dallas Goedert, who caught all 7 of his targets. AJ Brown, 1.8 fantasy points. Devonta Smith, 4.6. You're gonna expect down games, maybe not this down, but the Eagles just do not pass a lot. It's always gonna cap both of these guys' ceilings. AJ Brown, you're gonna keep him in your starting lineup. The Chiefs matchup is pretty tough, but it's one that should score. It has a 46.5 point game total. The Eagles are favored by 1.5. So it's going to be close. AJ Brown's going to be a start. Devonta Smith would probably be a start too, even though he is capped with the wide receiver 2 ceiling.
I don't know if I'm starting AJ Brown, honestly. He had one target in the very last 2 minutes of the game. He didn't look healthy to me. I know some people are saying that he's been on the injury report for the last about 4 weeks with a hamstring. He's out there. He's better than somebody else for sure because he's drawing some major defensive attention. He's still a big body. I mean, he's 226 pounds. He's 6'1". He still looked like he was blocking fine, but I don't know if he has the downfield speed or if they're going to use him that way, and they're not going to need him to as well. They're going to probably dominate this game. The Vegas line is very close. I think the Eagles are just the best team in the NFL. I don't think anybody is that close. These teams just played in the Super Bowl. What changed? Maybe the Eagles got better. Did the Eagles get better? Did the Chiefs get worse? They don't have Xavier Worthy or Rashee Rice. I don't see how this game is close. I mean, maybe I'm wrong there, but I'm probably not going to start A.J. Brown if I have other good options. Like if I drafted Ricky Pearsall and I have some other good wide receivers, if I drafted Egbuka and have other good wide receivers, A.J. Brown will probably be on my bench until I see a good week. And I'm probably going to trade him away, but I don't think he's a must start this week. If you drafted well, and you have Javonte Williams, you can throw him in your flex. You have other good receivers. I don't know. Avery, would you ever sit AJ Brown? Is that crazy?
It's not something I would be confident in. If you're in
Yeah.
a 10 team, maybe it's understandable, but I mean, the upside is capped again because of the pass volume. But if you want to go ahead and look up Aaron Jones from the
Yeah.
Minnesota Vikings, a game that we just recently saw against the Bears, the Vikings get a matchup against the Falcons this week, which is very positive to running backs, receivers. A lot of fantasy points will be scored here. But what did we just see from Aaron Jones? And what I saw was not efficient. I'll tell you that much. 8 carries, 23 yards. That's like 2.8 yards per carry. He did somewhat get saved in the receiving game with 3 receptions, 44 yards, and a touchdown. But that was all just dump offs. Like those were not necessarily the manufactured targets there were just to help JJ McCarthy. He's going to look better than he did last week. I mean, the Falcons defense is not crazy, but 15.7 fantasy points, I don't think can continue for Aaron Jones, especially when you have Jordan Mason, who just looked better.
Yeah, Jordan Mason looked better. Is that simple for me? I'm benching Aaron Jones.
Yeah, and then on the Atlanta side, you can look up Kyle Pitts. Is he going to be a confident start for you, Seth?
Woo, Kyle Pitts. I mean, how awesome
waiting
was that?
for this moment.
How awesome was that? I mean, tight end 7, 8 targets. Let's go. It is time, baby. Let's go. Honestly, it's not bad. It's not bad. I mean, if he's going to get the targets, they did spread the ball around a lot, but man, and they could not run the ball. And if that's going to be the case this year, Kyle Pitts is going to be good. Now, I do know that some of the good volume came when Drake London was maybe out of the game, or we saw some extra targets there. But man, I do think Kyle Pitts is someone to definitely roster, someone to definitely consider starting. And he's not a priority start, but we talked about some other tight ends in this video that he probably sneaks into the top 12 for me. So if you waited on tight end and you drafted Kyle Pitts, I think good job. You can put him in your lineup week 2.
And then we go down to start looking at the Monday slate. We actually have 2 games on Monday. Emeka Egbuka, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing the Houston Texans. This guy had a great fantasy week, 23.6 fantasy points. Now, was it as good as the fantasy point numbers say? Now, he did play almost every single snap. He was right up there with Mike Evans for routes run this week, but only 4 receptions, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, they were great, important touchdowns. He's definitely going to come back down to earth just a little bit, but the Houston Texans matchup is pretty good. Mike Evans is going to bounce back again, only 10 fantasy points. That'll come up. Cade Otton is a little bit worrisome because he had 0. He's going to bounce back a little bit. Not a guy I'm necessarily confident in starting. Seth, how do you feel about this team?
Yeah, overall, I think that's perfect analysis. Emeka Egbuka, 50% touchdown rate. Hopefully that continues. He'll be the greatest of all time, but unlikely that that's going to continue. I do think that Mike Evans bounces back. Cade Otton, I think, is a must sit right now. He's a good player, but he was on the injury report last week, and it kind of showed. with his 0 fantasy points. So Egbuka, a start for me. Love that he got some red zone targets. Mike Evans will probably be a little bit more open as teams give Egbuka a little bit more respect, which is going to be good for everybody. So I think you can start Evans, you can start Egbuka, you can start Bucky Irving, and I'm probably start Baker Mayfield, and then I'm sitting everybody else.
Yeah, and if you look up Dalton Schultz for the Houston side of things, this is a guy that I do want to talk about. Only 5.8 fantasy points, but might be a sleeper grab off the waiver wire if somebody doesn't have him because Cade Stover broke his foot.
Ooh.
He's going to be out indefinitely. And there was a 33% target share that went to both these tight ends last week against the Los Angeles Rams. So if we get a matchup here against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they allow a lot of fantasy points to receivers and tight ends here. So if Dalton Schultz is the only tight end in his offense and he can get a lot of targets in a team that doesn't have a lot of time to pass in that pocket because of how bad the offensive line is, he could be pretty startable.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is where I'd go if you got first place in your league and maybe you had George Kittle and you lost your tight end and you have bad waiver priority, or if you don't want to spend fab, Avery's 100% right. This is someone you could probably add for 0 fab or 1 fab, maybe go for 1, or with the last waiver priority, and someone that you could start this week.
Yeah, and when we look at the running backs here with Nick Chubb, not a guy I'm necessarily confident in starting here. It is a decent matchup, but there's just too many questions marks, especially with this offensive line not being good.
Yeah, and the Buccaneers last week did a great job stopping the run against Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, who are both really great runners. So I'm not going to start Nick Chubb this week.
Yeah, and our last game here, Quentin Johnston, the king himself, does he actually have hands? 24.9 fantasy football points last week. It was honestly a great showing in the 32-person league we have with all of the creators at WalterPicks. I sat Quentin Johnston. Now, in my defense, there is no defense. Are we starting him in regular size fantasy football leagues? That is the question. The Raiders defense is decent in allowing fantasy football points. He did have 7 targets, obviously 2 touchdowns. He was targeted in the red zone a good amount. That is a thing that we saw last year too. It's not like it's out of nowhere. But when you look at the pass volume for Justin Herbert, it was pretty good. 34 passing attempts. It's about average, a little bit higher than what we expect. But Quentin Johnston, definitely not a guy I'm throwing into my starting lineup, just expecting this kind of fantasy production. If you take away the 2 touchdowns, he still had over 12 fantasy points, so it's not terrible. But Seth, are you trusting Quentin Johnston in our lineups against the Vegas Raiders?
I am the wrong person to ask for this question because I had traded for Quentin Johnston a few years ago in my Dynasty League. I have Justin Herbert as well. And man, I'm just going to roll back the clock to last year. He gets too much hate. He really does. And I'm not saying you're hating on him, Avery, but just in general, look at his touchdown rate last year, wide receiver 6. I'm going to go to his game log and just pull up last year as well. He was actually pretty good. He had some good games. I mean, look at these stretches of games. He definitely had some bad games. We have a 22, a 15, a 31. He looks better. I mean, he's been training. He's been clearly working on his catching ability. He's the best red zone target for this team. And he consistently puts up some pretty good numbers. So I'm not saying you have to start him for sure, but I do think that he could be a start this week against the Raiders. I think he's going to continue to see great red zone targets. They moved efficiently. And Amari and Hampton struggled as well. So I think Quentin Johnston is a good deeper league start in the flex, and he's got plenty of upside. So if you're dealing with some injuries, we talked about some other players that just haven't shown up. He's a player that showed up week 1 in an offense that looks amazing. And that's the kind of thing I'd love to start. And 20% target share, not crazy. He was really efficient for sure. But 20% is something he could see every single week. With Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey, he's like the wide receiver 3. He's a tough guy to cover for your wide receiver. First round pick, I believe, out of TCU. I believe, again, I could be wrong about both those things. But he was very, very good. And with Keenan Allen and Ladd McConkey, I think you could start him because I don't know how you cover this team anymore. Keenan Allen was awesome.
Yeah.
Ladd McConkey was awesome. Quentin Johnston was awesome. Justin Herbert was awesome. This pass attack is amazing. So I'm not too scared to start him this week, honestly, especially if you're in a deeper league. You should start him.
And the good news
in the 32-man league, I would start him.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely not making that mistake again. But he did play 82% of the snaps, clearly with the starters.
Yeah.
Maybe Trey Harris will work in there eventually, but as of right now, Quentin Johnston is the clear number 3. And you look at Amari on Hampton, definitely not a great game fantasy football point-wise, but he did see over 80% of the snaps. He did see 15 carries. The efficiency wasn't great. Again, the defense last week for the Chiefs is very, very good against stopping the run, so not anything I'm too worried about. And you look at Ashton Jeanty for the other side of this, possibly something people are worried about. Hasn't really looked great. I know we can't take preseason for anything more than what it was, but it kind of carries into this week's matchup. 19 carries, under 40 yards. That's 2 yards per carry. 12 fantasy football points came from his 2 receptions, but even then, only 2 yards on 2 receptions. Like, he did lead the team in snaps, obviously at the running back position, but it was a tough matchup last week against the Patriots defense. We can start him this week. Another kind of tough one against the Chargers, but definitely moving him back in my rest of season rankings. You can check the updated rest of season rankings inside the WalterPicks app as well. Seth, what do you think about Ashton Jeanty?
Oh man, I do have him in some leagues. So I honestly think if you're in a smaller league, you could sit him. The Chargers rush defense is very good. So in this game is in honestly, this game is at 10 p.m. Eastern. That's what I saw yesterday. You don't want to stay up till Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern anyway. So you might bench it and let the rest of your team take over. But honestly, I this is like the AJ Brown situation where he's facing a very good team. So if you have someone on your bench that you're sitting who you think can score over 12 fantasy points, because if he doesn't score a touchdown, 12 fantasy points is probably his ceiling, honestly, against the Chargers defense. So if you don't have someone, if you have someone on your bench you think was going to score over 12 points, he may be a bench this week, unfortunately. I know that's crazy because he was like a first-round pick, but I'm reacting to what we saw. And like you said, 2 yards per carry, very little receptions. He had 80% rush share, 19 carries, and he's facing an even better defense this week. I don't see how it gets a lot better, and I'm not worried to sit him after week 1 if you have some other great options on your team.
Yeah, and it sounds like your dog is completely adamant about sitting Ashton Jeanty this week. So
he agrees. He agrees. Oh, okay, one last question, Avery. Javonte Williams or Ashton Jeanty?
I'm going Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, you probably should,
but
like Javonte Williams, I don't know. We'll see. I think that's honestly tough for me because I just like you look at week 1. If you take the nameplates off, Javonte Williams is definitely the better start based on the offense, based on the opportunities. But we'll see.
Yeah, let us know in the comments where you guys are putting Javonte Williams. Are you starting him? Are you sitting him? What do you expect this week? But that's going to finish out this video for us for the week-by-week or the game-by-game recap here going into the start sits of week 2. Guys, good luck coming into week 2. If you want more advice and more tips like this, make sure to be subscribed for these kinds of videos every week. And check out the WalterPicks app, which we have on screen. It's giving us all the stats for these videos. You can even use their start sit tool coming into week 2 to make sure all of the right decisions are covered. Thank you guys so much for watching this one, and we will see you in the next one coming very soon.